5 years have passed, yet every dawn still feels like the morning after his burial, sharp, cold, and unkind. Grief has a way of settling into the walls, and sometimes, when the wind shifts, I swear I hear my mate's last breath echoing through this forgotten cabin. Maybe that's why I wake before the sun. Because silence hurts less when I'm the one who breaks it first. The pack moved on the day they covered his coffin with soil. They praised his bravery, wept loud enough to be heard across the river, then wiped their hands clean and erased his name as if it stained them. An Omega warrior dying for the kingdom wasn't heroic. It was convenient. And once he was gone, our usefulness ended too. I learned the truth quickly. A widow with no rank is a shadow, and shadows are meant to disappear. But I didn't vanish. I couldn't. I had Oli. When I rise from my cot and cross the creaking floorboards, I find her curled under the patched blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling like she's breathing for both of us. 10 years old, yet stronger than anyone I've ever known. Her smile is the only warmth in this cabin, the only reminder that life can bloom even in ruined places. I brush a strand of hair from her cheek, and guilt twists in my chest. I protect her fiercely, endlessly. But the truth is, she's the one saving me. Every day. A distant howl rolls across the woods. It sounds like mourning. Or maybe that's just what it sounds like to someone who has been mourning for half a decade. I wrap my shawl tighter and turn away from the sleeping child, letting my eyes trace the dim corners of the cabin. There, hidden beneath the loose floorboard, lies the secret that has shaped every step I've taken since the night she was born. A truth so heavy, I've built my entire life around, shielding her from it. She doesn't know the danger in her own veins. She doesn't know why I flinch when her hands hover over dying flowers or broken creatures. She doesn't know the world would tear her apart if they discovered what she can do. And I pray, every single morning, that she never finds out how much it terrifies me. But secrets have edges, and mine has been cutting deeper each year. Today the wind carries a scent I haven't felt in a long time. Change. It presses against the cabin walls like a warning, or a promise. I don't know which. But the memory returns to me the way a wound aches before a storm. Slow, pulsing, impossible to ignore. Oli was 8 the first time the world shifted beneath my feet. It was an evening much like this one, the kind where the cabin smelled of damp wood and the sky pressed low, threatening rain. I had been sorting through a small bundle of wilted herbs, our meager supply for the week, when her soft footsteps approached behind me. "Mama, this one is sad," she had whispered. I turned to see her holding a shriveled sprig, its leaves curled and brittle. I expected her to ask if we could save it for tea, or if the roots could still be used. Instead, she cradled it as though it breathed. "Oli," I warned gently, "put that down before it—" "Too late." She pressed her fingers to the stem. Light, soft, warm, barely more than a glow, bloomed beneath her skin. It seeped into the plant like water soaking dry soil. I froze. My breath stopped, and before my eyes the dead thing straightened, leaves uncurling, color returning as if it had only been sleeping. The room fell silent. Oli looked up at me, smiling as though she had merely brushed dirt off her dress. "There, it's happy now." My heart dropped, not in wonder, not in pride, in terror. I grabbed her hands, not harshly but firmly enough that she blinked in confusion. The plant slipped from her fingers, alive, vibrant, impossible. "Who taught you that?" My voice shook despite me. "No one," she whispered. "It just happened." "Mama, did I do something wrong?" "Wrong." The word stabbed me. I pulled her into my arms, burying her against my chest as fear roared through me. "No, my love. I murmured. You did nothing wrong. But the world would think otherwise. The world would call her cursed, dangerous, a threat. Because healing like that, the kind born from pure spirit and unbound energy, was not a gift the kingdom welcomed. It was a legend mothers used to quiet their children, a myth the council had declared forbidden long before I was born, and my daughter carried it as effortlessly as breathing. That night, after she fell asleep, I paced the cabin until my bones ached. I knew what had to be done. There was no counsel to plead with, no healer to trust, no friend to confide in. Every path led to one truth. If anyone discovered her power, they would take her from me. So I locked the secret away, tighter than any vow I had ever made. The next morning marked the beginning of our silent routines. No touching unfamiliar plants, no helping injured animals, no wandering beyond the clearing. No questions when I pulled her close at the slightest shimmer of light under her palms. We learned to move like shadows, unseen, unheard, unnoticed. Oli never complained. She only watched me with those bright eyes, as if she already understood she carried something bigger than our small, fragile world. The seasons shifted around us. Life grew harsher, food scarcer, but we held to the quiet, to the secrecy, to the promise that kept her safe. Still, some nights, when the fire burned low, I would catch her staring at her own hands with a mixture of wonder and fear. "Mama," she once whispered in the dark, "if I was born with this, doesn't that mean I'm meant to help?" My throat tightened. I pulled her close, stroking her hair while shadows danced on the walls. "You are meant to live," I murmured. "And I will make sure you do." She didn't argue. She never did. But the truth sat heavy between us, even then. A gift like hers does not stay hidden forever. And deep down, I feared the day it would demand to be seen. By the time the third year of silence settled around our cabin, the land had begun to change. What used to be a soft blanket of green slowly thinned into brittle yellow. Streams that once murmured nearby grew quieter each month until their voices vanished entirely. Even the wind felt thirsty. The drought did not knock. It broke in like a thief, stealing everything that kept us alive. My small garden, the only thing that stood between us and hunger, withered day by day. The soil cracked like old skin, and every seed I planted seemed to sigh once before surrendering. I tried to hope, tried to pretend I could coax something to grow, but hope dries quicker than plants when the sky refuses to open. We rationed our food until there was nothing left to cut into halves. I encouraged Oli to eat more than me, but she always pushed her portion toward my bowl with a stubborn little frown. "You'll faint if you don't eat," she'd whisper. I smiled for her sake, but inside fear was carving hollow spaces in me. And then, everything shattered. It happened one morning, quiet as a breath. Oli rose from her cot, swayed, and caught herself on the table. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, usually bright and curious, looked dull, unfocused. "Mama, I feel strange," she whispered. I reached her in 2 steps. Her forehead was burning, her pulse too fast. My heart thundered as I guided her to lie down. "It's just hunger," I told myself. "Just exhaustion." But when she tried to heal the small scratch on her arm, a trick she'd used privately, quietly so many times, the light from her palms flickered and died. A cold wave rolled through me. Her gift had never failed before. She looked up at me, frightened in a way I had never seen. "Mama? I can't make it work." Everything inside me collapsed. I pressed my hand to her cheek, trying to steady my voice. "It's all right, my love. You're just weak. Rest." But nothing about this was all right. Her power, as dangerous as it was also her protection. It kept her body strong, resilient. And now it was fading, along with her strength. By evening, her breaths had grown shallow, each one tugging at her as if the air itself fought her. Her small fingers clutched mine with a desperation that tore through me. "Mama, don't leave." "I won't, I promise." But promises don't cure fevers. Promises don't stop a child's body from trembling. And promises don't restore forbidden power when it slips away. I wiped her forehead again and again, praying, pleading, shaking as fear wrapped its hands around my throat. I needed help, but calling a healer meant revealing everything. Her touch, her gift, her light. They would see her as an abomination. They would take her from me. They would call for laws older than mercy. I was trapped between saving her and losing her. Night deepened, and her condition worsened. I stared at the last of our herbs, dry, useless scraps. I had nothing left to give her. Nothing but my desperation. And desperation was louder than fear. When dawn brushed the sky, I rose from her side, legs shaking, heart thundering. I touched her cheek one last time. "I'll be back," I whispered, even though I didn't know if it was true. Her breathing hitched, and that was the moment I knew. If I didn't act now, I would lose the only soul keeping me alive. So I stepped out into the dying world, and walked toward the one place I had promised I'd never go. The market was already awake when I stumbled into its chaos. Merchants shouting prices, children weaving through bodies, the smell of dust and desperation hanging in the air like smoke. I pushed forward, clutching the small pouch of coins I had saved over months, barely enough for bread, but hope makes fools of mothers. I approached the first healer's tent, breath jagged. "My daughter is sick," I said, bowing my head. "Please, I need herbs, anything to bring down her fever." The healer didn't even look up. "Full price or no service." I emptied my pouch. The coins clattered pathetically on the wood. His jaw tightened. "That won't get you a sprig of mint, Omega. Move aside." Heat stung my eyes, but I swallowed it and stepped away. There were more healers, more chances. At the next stall, a woman glanced at my worn clothes and shook her head before I even spoke. "I don't serve those who can't afford to return." "It's for my child," my voice cracked. "She might not make it through the day." Her expression softened, only for a heartbeat. Then fear settled over her features like frost. "There's sickness everywhere. You could be carrying something. Leave before others see you." Others? Always others. Always their rules, their comfort, their fear. I moved from tent to tent, stall to stall, begging, pleading, losing pieces of myself with every rejection. Doors closed, faces turned away. Some stepped back as if my grief were contagious. By midday, my legs trembled from exhaustion and humiliation. Ollie's face flashed in my mind, pale, burning, fading. I felt time slipping through my hands like sand. And panic. Panic snapped something inside me. I found myself reaching for a bundle of fever herbs displayed at a corner stall. No one noticed. No one cared. My fingers closed around the stems. "Just grab it," a voice inside whispered. "For her. Only for her." I tucked the bundle into my shawl and walked away. Then walked faster. Then ran. Only when I reached the shade of the forest did I collapse, gasping, clutching the stolen herbs like they were my own heartbeat. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I might shatter completely. When I returned to the cabin, Ollie's breathing was shallow, her little body trembling. I crushed the herbs, boiled them with trembling hands, and fed her the warm mixture sip by sip. Hours stretched like years. Then, finally, her breathing steadied. Her fever eased, her fingers unclenched. Color returned to her cheeks, soft and slow like dawn rising over dark hills. Relief hit me hard enough to steal my breath. I fell to my knees beside her bed, tears spilling freely for the first time in years. "Thank you," I whispered to the moon goddess. "Thank you for giving her back to me." Oli stirred and murmured, "Mama?" "I'm here," I said, brushing her hair back. "Rest now." She smiled weakly and drifted into sleep. But peace is a thin wall, and guilt slipped through its cracks like smoke. I had stolen. Not bread, not scraps, but healing herbs from a stall. A crime the council punished without mercy. The weight of it pressed against my chest, reminding me that the world does not forgive Omegas. Still, as I listened to my daughter breathe softly beside me, I knew one truth. If I had to commit 10 more crimes to save her, I would. Yet even in that certainty, a tremor of dread curled beneath my ribs. Because peace, especially for someone like me, never lasts. The morning after Oli's fever broke should have tasted like mercy. Soft, fragile, precious. Instead, it shattered under the crash of boots pounding toward our cabin. The sound froze me where I stood. Oli sat up on her cot, still weak, rubbing her eyes. "Mama?" "Hide," I breathed. She blinked in confusion. "But—" "No questions. Go. Now." Something in my voice must have told her the truth. That danger had found us. She slipped from her bed and disappeared through the loose floorboard we had prepared for emergencies. Her tiny fingers pushed it shut just as the door exploded inward. Guards swarmed the cabin like a storm of steel and anger. Their uniforms gleamed, their expressions twisted with disdain. One grabbed my arm before I could even raise a hand in defense. "I didn't... Please, my daughter..." My words tangled, desperation clawing at my throat. "No time for lies," the captain snapped. "You're wanted for theft under Noble Cornelius's decree." They didn't give me a moment to breathe. Cold metal clamped around my wrists, chains that felt far heavier than they should. Rough hands dragged me over the threshold as the cabin's familiar shadows receded behind me. For a heartbeat, I glanced back, praying Oli remained hidden, praying she stayed silent. The forest stretched around us as they marched me toward the heart of the kingdom. Each step felt like a descent into a place where hope could not follow. My legs shook, but the chains forced me forward. By the time we reached the Alpha King's court, my pulse was a wild, choking rhythm. The doors opened, and everything inside me stilled. The hall was vast, columns rising like ancient giants, banners shimmering in muted gold. And at the center, surrounded by nobles and advisors, sat Alpha King Julius. Even confined to his wheelchair, he radiated something fierce and commanding. Strength wrapped in restraint, fire contained in iron. His amber eyes lifted to me, and the world seemed to narrow to that single gaze. Not cruel, not kind, but assessing, deep, searching, unblinking. A murmur rippled through the hall as I was shoved forward. I stumbled, caught myself, then bowed because instinct demanded it. Noble Cornelius stepped out from the crowd, smugness dripping from every line of his face. "Your Majesty, this Omega stole from my stall. She should be executed to set an example." Voices erupted instantly. "Death is too lenient. Thieves spread rot, punish her." An Omega stealing from a noble? Unthinkable. Their words slashed at me from every direction. My knees weakened under the noise, under the hate, under the weight of being exactly what they believed me to be. Small, disposable, unworthy. I lifted my head just enough to find Julius again. He didn't join their fury. He didn't echo their disgust. He simply watched, silent, still, studying me as though there were pieces of a puzzle he hadn't yet assembled. Cornelius stepped closer, spitting venom with every word. "My lord, she deserves no mercy. She is an Omega. They are prone to deceit and Enough. Julius didn't raise his voice, yet the hall trembled in silence. His eyes never left mine. Tell me, he said, why you stole. The room inhaled sharply, my breath caught. My heart hammered against my ribs, desperate, terrified, breaking. Because this was the moment everything could collapse. And he watched, waiting, like a man who could pierce through any lie I attempted. The chains were heavy, but his gaze was heavier still. And beneath all the noise, beneath all my fear, one truth pulsed quietly. The Alpha King was not looking at a criminal. He was looking at a woman he wanted to understand. The hall buzzed with outrage, a hive of stinging words aimed at me. My knees trembled beneath the weight of it, voices snarling for punishment, eyes burning with contempt. I felt the moment judgment gathered like a storm above my head, seconds from breaking. Julius leaned forward slightly, fingers resting on the arms of his chair, gaze unreadable. Why did you steal? He asked again, quieter this time, but heavier. My lips parted. No sound came. How could I explain choosing crime over losing my child? How could I reveal enough truth to save myself without exposing Oli's impossible gift? I drew in a shaky breath. But the doors of the hall suddenly burst open. A small figure darted inside, breathless, fragile, determined. Oli. My heart stopped. She ran straight past the guards who scrambled too late to catch her. Her bare feet slapped against the polished floor, echoing through the stunned silence. Gasps rose among the nobles as whispers rippled down the rows. A child? Whose girl is that? Someone stop her! I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. She had left the safety of the cabin, broken the rule I drilled into her bones because she thought I was going to die. Oli, I whispered, my voice barely sound. She reached me and grabbed onto my arm, her warmth searing through the cold bite of the chains. She stood in front of me like a shield far too small to block the world. Her chin lifted, brave in a way no child should be. Let my mother go! The hall froze. Cornelius sputtered. What is this? Who let her inside? Before anyone could drag her away, Oli spun toward the dais, toward the Alpha King himself. And for a moment, an impossible quiet fell. Every eye fixed on the tiny girl facing the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. Release my mother, she said clearly, and I will heal you. The world cracked open. A roar of disbelief surged instantly. Heal! She's mocking the king! Blasphemy! Someone remove her at once! Guards moved again, but Julius lifted a hand. They froze. The king's amber gaze sharpened, slicing through the chaos. Not angered, not insulted. Intrigued. It was subtle, barely a shift. But I felt it like a tremor beneath the earth. His attention locked onto Oli, studying her with a depth that frightened me. He leaned forward, his brows narrowing, as if something in her words had struck a long-buried chord inside him. Cornelius, red with fury, pointed a shaking finger at her. Your Majesty, this is a trick. The brat will say anything to save her mother. She should be punished for... Silence, Julius warned, voice low. Cornelius snapped his mouth shut. Oli stood unflinchingly under the king's stare. She looked so small in that vast hall, yet she radiated a courage I could barely understand. My heart twisted painfully with pride and terror. I whispered her name again, desperate pleading, begging her to stop. Oli, no, please. But she didn't turn, didn't flinch. She took a step closer to Julius. You cannot walk, she said softly, but I can help you. I know I can. The court erupted again, louder than before, voices crashing into each other. This is madness! What insolence! What disgrace! Remove the Omega child now! Oli's small hands clenched at her sides, trembling, but not from fear, from resolve. My knees weakened. The room spun. Every secret I had protected for years, every warning, every whispered instruction, every sleepless night was unraveling in front of me. I tried reaching for her, but the chains jerked me back. "Please!" My voice cracked. "Please don't listen to her. She's only a child." Julius's eyes slid to me, slow, assessing, something unreadable flickering beneath the amber. Not disgust, not shock. Something deeper, something awakening. He turned back to Oli. "Tell me," he said, voice lower, thoughtful. "Why do you believe you can heal me when others have failed?" Her answer carved through the noise with the purity of truth. "Because I have what others don't." Her small voice quivered. "And because my mama is all I have left." The hall went deathly still. My breath lodged in my throat. The ground swayed. The world narrowed to that tiny, trembling girl, and the king whose gaze softened almost imperceptibly at her confession. He studied her with an intensity that frightened me, seeing too much, noticing details no one else could. And then he smiled, barely, a faint, fleeting shift of his lips, but it struck me like a bolt of lightning. The hall did not see it, but I did. Interest, curiosity, recognition, as if he were staring not at a child, but at a mystery calling to him. Oli looked back at him with eyes far braver than her years, standing before a court ready to tear her apart, offering the one thing she should never, ever reveal. My heart broke open, fear clawing up one side, pride burning bright on the other. She had walked into the wolf's den. For me, for a long moment the hall held its breath. Guards hovered like drawn blades. Nobles simmered with outrage, their whispers sharp enough to cut skin. And in the center of it all, my daughter stood trembling but unbroken, facing a king with more courage than should fit inside such a small frame. Julius lifted his hand again. Silence shattered the noise instantly, the kind of silence that weighed on the chest and warned everyone not to test him twice. His gaze swept over the nobles, cold, commanding, final. Then he turned to me. "Step forward," he said. The chains rattled as the guards pushed me closer. My knees nearly buckled under the pressure of 1,000 eyes boring into me. The king's amber eyes locked onto mine, and the hall seemed to fade. There was no throne, no council, no judgment, just a man staring into the raw truth of a woman who had been forgotten by the world. "Tell me your story," he said quietly. "All of it." My mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed to lie, to protect Oli, to shield our fragile world from collapsing. But there was something in his eyes, steady, intent, heavy with expectation, that drew the truth out of me like a tide surrendering to the moon. I swallowed hard. "My mate served as a warrior to this pack," I began, voice trembling. "He died protecting it. And after his burial, we were abandoned." Whispers rippled through the hall, disbelieving, offended that I dared speak truths they preferred to ignore. Julius didn't silence them this time. He simply waited, gaze anchored to mine, forcing me to continue. "We were cast out," I said, words cracking. "No support, no aid. No one came. I survived for my daughter's sake. I worked, I begged, I traded what little I could. But the drought," my voice faltered, "it took everything from us." Cornelius scoffed loudly, but for the first time since entering this hall, I didn't shrink. My anger rose, thin, trembling, but real. "I stole herbs because my child was dying," I whispered. "Not for selfishness, not out of disrespect. Out of desperation no mother should ever face." My gaze dropped to the floor, ashamed of the truth, ashamed of my weakness. But when I looked up again, slowly, carefully, Julius wasn't angry. He wasn't disgusted. He looked human. A flicker crossed his expression. a crack in the polished armor he wore so flawlessly. Something old, something weary, something like guilt. The council felt it too. Their anxious glances darted between us. Cornelius stepped forward, face red with outrage. "Your Majesty, she's manipulating the court. These creatures lie." "Enough," Julius murmured, but the force behind it rolled through the chamber like thunder. Cornelius paled. Julius leaned back slightly, eyes still fixed on me as if reading things I didn't dare speak. "You were abandoned," he said softly, too softly for the noble's pomp to shield them from the accusation buried in his tone. "By this kingdom." A hush fell again. He lifted one hand. The guard holding my chains hesitated, then obeyed, unlocking them with trembling fingers. Metal dropped to the floor with a heavy clatter that echoed like the closing of a long-forgotten door. My wrists burned with sudden freedom. Julius's voice carried clearly across the hall. "She is released." Gasps exploded. "What?" "This is against protocol. She committed theft, publicly admitted." "Your Majesty, reconsider." But Julius did not reconsider. He did not even blink. He looked at his council, the same wolves who had shouted for my death, and their protests died one by one under the weight of his stare. "This kingdom failed her," he said, letting the words ring, "not the other way around." The silence that followed was suffocating, a tension thick enough to choke on. The nobles stiffened, shocked, uncertain, fearful of what this meant. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. I was too stunned, too relieved, too overwhelmed to understand what shift had just occurred. I felt Ollie's hands wrap around my arm, her tiny fingers gripping me tight. I gathered her close, breathing her in, feeling her heartbeat against my side like a fragile drum of life. Relief washed through me, a warm wave breaking over cold stone. But even as it soothed me, a tremor lingered beneath its surface. A warning, an unease, because the moment Julius defied the council, something changed. I felt the shift like the first crack in ice, silent, nearly invisible, but deadly in its promise. And though I couldn't name it yet, I understood this much. Freedom always comes with a cost, and ours had just begun. Freedom should have felt like air filling my lungs, fresh, sweet, overwhelming. Instead, the moment the chains fell from my wrists, the hall plunged into a tense, brittle silence. Relief trembled through me, but unease curled at its edges like smoke. Ollie pressed close, her little hands clinging to my sleeve. I bent to whisper, "We're going home." But she didn't move. Her gaze had fixed on Julius, steady, unblinking, too knowing for a child who had nearly died just hours before. Her brows drew together, her lips parting with a soft breath. "Mama," she whispered, "I owe a debt." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Ollie, no. I have to," she said gently, as if she were explaining something simple, something inevitable. Before I could reach for her, she slipped away. "Wait," my voice cracked, but the hall swallowed it whole. Ollie stepped toward the dais with the quiet confidence of someone who did not yet understand consequences. Nobles gaped, guards stiffened. Julius watched her with a stillness so intense the air felt tight around us. She stopped at his feet. Her voice carried in the heavy hush. "You saved my mother. Now I will save you." Everything inside me screamed. Every instinct, every warning, every secret I had buried for years. "Ollie, stop!" I cried, pushing through the guards, but they blocked me, more out of shock than duty. She lifted her small hands and placed them gently on the king's lifeless legs. The hall exhaled in one collective gasp. And then, light bloomed. Soft at first, a faint shimmer beneath her palm, like moonlight trapped under skin. Then brighter, flowing through her fingers, threading into muscle and bone. A warmth rippled outward, a pulse of life that seemed to awaken the air itself. Julius inhaled sharply. The sensation must have been something he hadn't felt in years, feeling where there had been nothing, heat where there had been cold, life where there had been stone. His fingers dug into the arms of his chair. Color flushed into his cheeks. His breathing quickened, and slowly, his legs twitched. Gasps exploded around the hall. A councilwoman fell to her knees. A guard dropped his spear in disbelief. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. The ground beneath me felt unreal, shifting. Impossible. Oli's light intensified for one final heartbeat, and then vanished. Silence swallowed the hall. Julius stared down at his legs as if seeing them for the first time. Trembling, stunned, disoriented, alive. He placed both hands on the chair's armrests, and he stood. The hall erupted into chaos. Some cheered, voices rising with wild joy. A miracle! The king walks, by the moon, he walks. Blessed child! Others recoiled in horror, stumbling backward, fear twisting their features. What witchcraft is this? No child should have that power. This is unnatural. But the loudest voice, the one that split the joy like a blade, belonged to Cornelius. Abomination! His scream echoed through the chamber, slicing the moment in half. All eyes snapped toward him as he pointed at Oli, his face contorted with terror and hatred. Kill her before she kills us! End it now! A wave of panic surged through the nobles, fueled by old legends and darker fears. Whispers turned to shouts. Shouts turned to threats. She's dangerous! Unholy! This is a curse! Stop her! No Omega child should hold such power. I felt the world tilt sharply. Guards reached for their weapons. My legs nearly buckled under the weight of terror. Oli, my Oli! I lunged forward, grabbing her and pulling her against me. Her small body trembled, not from regret, but exhaustion. I'm tired, Mama, she whispered weakly. I wrapped myself around her protectively, ready to shield her with my flesh, my bones, my life. If they wanted her, they would take me first. The nobles surged forward in panic. But then, a roar tore through the hall, a sound so powerful it shook the pillars and silenced every breath. Enough! Julius stepped in front of me and Oli, planting himself like an unshakable wall of iron. His shoulders squared, his gaze sharpened into something lethal. Power rolled off him in silent waves, a warning that needed no words. Anyone who touches them, Julia said coldly, answers to me. The hall recoiled. Not a single guard reached for a weapon. Not a single noble dared speak. Even Cornelius flinched, his outrage shrinking beneath the king's fury. Julius turned slightly, enough for his voice to carry, but not enough to leave us exposed. My life has been returned to me, he said, each word ringing with authority. And the one who restored it will not be punished. His hand lifted in a subtle gesture. The guards lowered their spears. The court fell silent. Only then did he look down at me, at my arms wrapped around Oli, at the terror twisting my face, at the exhaustion hollowing my bones. Something shifted in his eyes. A softness, a warmth, a quiet revelation. Come, he said gently. I will not let them harm you. Before I could answer, he bent down and lifted Oli from my arms with surprising ease. She rested her head against his shoulder, trusting him in a way she had never trusted another soul besides me. The sight struck something deep, something I wasn't ready to feel. With his free hand, he touched my elbow lightly, guiding me. And the hall watched in stunned, breathless silence as the king walked out of the throne room with an Omega woman and her gifted child under his protection. His private court was nothing like the grand hall. It was quiet, warm, cocooned from the noise of the kingdom. Guards stood outside the door, but none were allowed inside. Not even his advisors. When the heavy doors closed behind us, the silence felt different. Safer. Heavier. More intimate. Julius laid Oli gently on a long, upholstered bench. She was already drifting asleep, her power drained, her body exhausted. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair back, watching her eyelids flutter. He watched me. I felt it before I saw it, the weight of his gaze settling over me like a cloak. I lifted my head slowly. Julius stood a few steps away, steadying himself with the table beside him. Not from weakness. He was still adjusting to the miracle that had restored him. But his eyes, they weren't on his legs. They were on me. And not with the curiosity he'd shown in the hall. Not with the suspicion most alphas gave an Omega. His expression was warmer, layered, thoughtful. It unsettled something deep in my chest. "You risked your life for her," he said softly. "She is my life," I murmured back. A silence stretched between us. Not awkward, but charged. Like the pause before sunlight breaks through clouds. He approached slowly, respectfully, lowering himself into the seat across from me. For a long moment he simply studied my face, as though trying to understand the pieces of a story no one had ever asked me to tell. "I owe her my life," he finally said, "and by extension, I owe you." "You owe me nothing," I whispered, my hands trembling as I adjusted Ollie's blanket. "Don't say that," Julius answered quietly. "You saved your daughter. She saved me. And now it seems the only thing standing between your family and death is me." I swallowed hard. He wasn't wrong. The kingdom outside those locked doors was simmering with fear, suspicion, and hunger for anything that resembled control. And Ollie's gift, beautiful, impossible, miraculous, terrified them. Julius leaned back, exhaling a slow breath. "They will come for her," he said. "For you. They will justify it with laws, and fear, and tradition." A chill swept through me. "Then why bring us here? Why not send us away before they turn on you too?" He lifted his gaze, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something raw beneath the king's armor. "Because I will not abandon you," Julius said simply. "Not after what I've seen. Not after what she did." There was sincerity in his voice, a quiet vow wrapped in something deeper, something unspoken. "Besides," he added, a faint smile tugging at his lips, "you have a way of making me see this kingdom differently." Heat rose to my cheeks. Julius wasn't flirting. He wasn't even trying. But the warmth in his eyes, the softness in his tone. The way he looked at me as though I were more than the invisible widow I had been for years. It was enough to shake the walls I had built around myself. He rested his hand on the table between us, not reaching, not intruding, simply offering presence. "Rest tonight," he said. "Both of you. You're safe here." Safe. I hadn't heard that word in years, and hearing it now from him, spoken like a promise, unraveled something inside me. As the night deepened, and Ollie slept peacefully for the first time in days, I felt Julius's gaze return again and again. Curious. Protective. Warm in a way that scared me more than the council ever could. Because danger I understood. Cruelty I expected. But kindness? Softness? A king looking at an Omega widow as if she mattered? That was the beginning of a new kind of fear. And, quietly, the beginning of something else. Days passed inside Julius's private court, each one folding into the next like quiet chapters in a story that didn't quite belong to the world outside. The kingdom roared beyond the sealed doors, fearful, furious, hungry for answers. But here, within these stone walls, life softened into something fragile and nearly peaceful. Almost. Oli recovered quickly, her strength returning like sunlight to a dim room. and with every returning breath, she drew Julius into her orbit. At first, he approached her the way a king approaches unknown magic, carefully, respectfully, with one eye always watching for danger. But Oli shattered that reserve with ease. She asked him simple questions no court advisor dared to ask. Does your crown hurt your head? Do kings get lonely? Why do you look sad when no one is watching? The first time she said that, Julius froze. Truly froze. Like she had pulled a truth from him he didn't even know he carried. Then he laughed, an unpracticed, startled laugh that echoed off the marble walls. He looked younger when he laughed. Softer. Almost human. And Oli adored it. She made it her mission to coax that sound out of him again. She succeeded. Often. He let her braid tiny pieces of his hair. He let her prank him with a pebble swap game she invented. He let her sit on the armrest of his chair and tell him stories about imaginary creatures she'd drawn in the dirt back home. He even teased her back, awkwardly at first, then with genuine warmth. Watching them felt like watching two parts of a puzzle click together. Unexpected, but right in a way that made my throat tighten. When Oli napped or drew quietly by the window, Julius turned his attention to me. Not like a king, not like a ruler interrogating a subject, but like a man reaching for understanding. He asked about my mate, how he fought, how he died, why the kingdom forgot him. He asked where I found food during the drought, how long the nights felt when Oli was sick, what it meant to be alone on the outskirts of a pack that pretended not to see me. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He listened. Truly listened. There were moments when he had to look away, jaw clenched, eyes shadowed with something raw. Guilt. If I hadn't been confined, he said quietly one evening, I might have seen what my council hid from me. You were still the king, I murmured, not accusing, just honest. He flinched. A heavy silence settled between us, but it wasn't a wall. It was the beginning of truth. For the first time I saw the burden he carried. Not the crown, not the throne, but the weight of choices made in his name without his knowledge. The man beneath the crown was far more fractured, and far more human than I had expected, and far more dangerous to my heart. But outside those walls, the kingdom was unraveling. Rumors ignited like dry grass catching flame. Fear slithered through the streets, fueled by Cornelius's silver tongue. She resurrected the king's legs with witchcraft. No mortal child should wield such power. Such gifts come from darkness. If she lives, doom follows. The whispers spread into shouts, and the shouts grew into demands. All Omega power must be purged. The healer child must be executed before the curse spreads. The king is being manipulated by an Omega widow. Cornelius stoked the hatred, adding poison to every word the kingdom swallowed. He appeared at public forums, rousing the citizens with stories of ancient abominations, forgotten punishments, catastrophic omens. Soon mobs gathered outside the palace gates. Soon the council convened emergency meetings. Soon petitions filled the courtyards, calls for Oli's death signed by hundreds who had never met her, never seen her, never cared she was only 10. Inside the council chambers, chaos reigned, and Julius faced it alone. He stood before them, defending us with a fire that startled even his oldest advisors. She saved my life, he thundered, and I will not allow this kingdom to repay her with death. But, Your Majesty, this is unnatural, dangerous. Unfamiliar, Julius corrected sharply, not dangerous. We must act before word spreads to other kingdoms. Then let it spread, he snapped. Let them hear that a child mended what their armies, healers, and gods could not. She threatens the balance. Your fear threatens the kingdom far more than she ever could. But fear is stubborn. Fear listens to its own voice, not truth. Cornelius led the charge, insisting Oli was a risk, that I was manipulating the king, that Julius's restored strength clouded his judgment. Tension rose like a tide, with no moon to guide it. "The citizens want her dead," a councilwoman warned. "If you defy them, revolt may follow." Julius didn't waver. "I will burn this council to the ground," he said, "before I let them harm her." That sentence hung in the air, dangerous, electric, unforgettable. The council fell silent. They realized something I had only just begun to understand. The king they once controlled was gone. A different man stood before them now, one revived not just in body, but in will. When Julius returned to the private chamber that night, exhaustion clung to him like a shadow, but when his eyes found Oli curled in her blankets, he softened instantly. Then he looked at me, not with duty, not with obligation, but with something warm and unguarded. "You saved me," he said quietly. I shook my head. "It was her." "Maybe," he murmured. "But you're the reason she exists. You're the reason she lived long enough to save me. And that matters." My breath caught. Something was happening. Something neither of us had asked for. Something neither of us knew how to stop. He stepped closer, not touching me, not daring, but close enough that warmth brushed my skin like a whisper. "You and your daughter deserve more than what this kingdom has given you," he said, "and I intend to make it right." My heart thudded painfully, because standing there in the dim glow of lantern light, I saw not the Alpha King, but the man. A man whose laughter Oli brought back. A man whose strength she restored. A man who looked at me as if the world had finally shown him something worth fighting for, not with laws or councils, but with his own heart. And that scared me more than any threat waiting beyond those walls, because I had lost a mate. I had learned to survive without softness. I had sworn never to love again. Yet here he was, a spark the kingdom could not ignore, and a fire I feared I could not outrun. The night the proposal came, the palace felt different. Tense, restless, as if the very stones sensed the kingdom shifting beneath our feet. Oli had finally drifted into sleep, her small breaths soft and even, the blankets rising and falling gently over her frame. I lingered beside her, smoothing her hair, grounding myself in the one constant piece of my life. But behind me, I felt the storm. Julius stood near the balcony, back turned, shoulders rigid. The moon cast a pale glow across him, outlining the hard line of his jaw, the tension in his stance, the weight he carried without complaint. The air between us thrummed with something unspoken. He wasn't a king in that moment. He was a man wrestling with a decision large enough to break him. "Come here," he said softly, not a command, but an invitation carved from exhaustion. I rose slowly and crossed the chamber. He didn't look at me immediately. Instead, he stared into the night, as if the darkness held answers he could not find in the council, the kingdom, or even within himself. "Today," he murmured, "my own advisors threaten to vote me out of power if I continue protecting you." My breath stilled. "And the people," he continued, voice low, "are demanding blood. They want the child they call a miracle gone. They want the Omega who raised her punished. They want—" His jaw clenched. "They want my silence." I swallowed. "Julius." "They will never stop coming," he cut in softly. "Not tomorrow, not next week, not next year. As long as you remain a mateless Omega in their eyes, you are prey. Both of you." A tremor ran through me. "We can hide." "You've been hiding your whole life," he said gently, turning toward me at last. I am offering you a place where you no longer have to." The words hung heavy between us. I felt it then, even before he spoke, the shift in the air, the weight in his eyes, the truth he had carried all day without letting it break the surface. He took a step closer, then another. When he finally stood before me, the distance between us narrowed into something intimate, something trembling. "I want you by my side," Julius said, "as my mate." The world stopped. My breath caught painfully, my ribs tightening around a heart suddenly unsteady. I stared at him, the meaning sinking deeper, heavier, more terrifying than anything I had faced in years. This wasn't the king speaking from his throne. This wasn't politics. This wasn't obligation. This was Julius, the man Oli made laugh, the man I saw guilt and fire and softness in, offering me a place in his life that no Omega widow had ever been given, a place no one like me was meant to touch. My pulse hammered. Julius, I can't." His expression shifted, hope tightening, bracing for the blow he already sensed coming. "Not because I don't care," I whispered quickly. "Not because I don't feel something, but because the world is burning outside these walls. Because you're asking me out of fear. Fear for us, fear of losing power, fear of what they'll do. And my voice wavered. I can't accept something born from desperation." A flicker of pain crossed his face, sharp, real, unguarded. I had seen him angry. I had seen him protective. I had seen him fierce. But this wounded quiet, struck deeper than any raised voice ever could. "So you're refusing," he said softly. The words trembled under the surface, even though he tried to keep them steady. "I'm refusing right now," I breathed, "but not forever. Not like that. I need you to want me on a day when you're not fighting the whole kingdom. I need to say yes when it's a choice, not a shield." He closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself against a blow he had never prepared for. When he opened them again, the king was gone. Only the man remained, hurt, searching, aching for an answer I wasn't ready to give. "I understand," he said. But he didn't. Not truly. I saw it in the stiffness of his shoulders, in the tiny crack in his voice, in the way he turned from me for a moment, collecting himself. My refusal had struck a place deep inside him, one he didn't let anyone reach. Yet when he faced me again, something new flickered in his expression. Determination. Fiercer than before. Sharper. Steadier. "If your answer cannot be yes today," he said, voice low but resolute, "then I will simply earn the day it becomes yes." A shiver swept through me. He stepped closer, not touching, not daring, but close enough I felt the warmth of his breath. "I don't withdraw from what I want," Julius murmured. "And I want you. I want Oli safe. And I want this kingdom to see you the way I do." My heart thudded painfully. Softness glimmered at the edges of his resolve. Warmth pulled at the edges of his strength. And beneath it all, affection. Unspoken, but growing like a spark coaxed into flame. He turned away, giving me the space I so desperately needed, but not an inch more than that. And that night, as I watched him take a quiet seat beside Oli's sleeping form, keeping silent vigil beside the girl who gave him life again, I realized this truth. My refusal did not push him away. It lit something in him, something powerful, something undeniable, something I could no longer pretend not to feel. The king's desire to protect us was no longer born from fear. It was becoming something far more dangerous, something that felt like love. The morning after Julius's wounded but unwavering vow, the kingdom rose under a sky choked with storm clouds. Ominous, waiting, mirroring the tension thickening the palace halls. Something had shifted in him overnight. Something sharpened and resolved. And by midday, that shift became action. Julius launched an investigation. Not a quiet inquiry. Not a symbolic gesture to calm the council. A full, merciless excavation of truth. Every record Cornelius had touched. Every decree he had manipulated. Every citizen he had silenced. Every market stall he controlled. Every whisper he had fed into the kingdom until fear rotted through the streets. Julius tore through the shadows Cornelius had built over years, shadows the council had accepted, shadows the citizens feared, shadows I had unknowingly lived beneath. And as the layers peeled back, the stench of corruption filled the kingdom like smoke from a burning forest. Cornelius had done more than fanfare. He had engineered it. He had inflated prices during the drought, letting families starve so his storehouses grew full. He had bribed healers to ignore Omega pleas for aid. He had used his influence to erase reports of abuse, especially against widows and low-ranked wolves. He had rallied mobs, pushing them to the edge of violence to force the king's hand. He had stolen from the treasury under false emergency orders. And worst of all, his accusations against Oli were not fear-driven. They were calculated. If she was deemed a threat, he could seize her, study her, exploit her power for his own gain. The truth hit Julius like a blade. Fury simmered beneath his calm exterior, deep and quiet. The kind of anger that precedes storms. When the investigation concluded, the king summoned the entire court. Again. But this time, he wasn't the one in trial. The hall pulsed with unease as nobles shuffled into their seats. The council sat stiff, eyes darting nervously. Rumors had outpaced the investigation, whispers of Cornelius's crimes slithering through every corner of the palace. I stood beside Oli near the back of the hall, protected by guards Julius personally chose. My heart hammered. Oli squeezed my hand. "Mama, he looks angry," she whispered. I followed her gaze. Julius sat upon his throne, not weak, not uncertain, not confined by doubt or fear. His posture was straight, his expression carved from stone. The torchlight ignited embers in his amber eyes. Not anger, judgment. Cornelius was dragged forward, still trying to paint arrogance onto a face now cracked with panic. "Your Majesty," he sneered, struggling for control. "This spectacle is unnecessary. The real threat, those two standing in your shadow." Julius raised a hand. Silence swallowed Cornelius's voice whole. "Do not speak of threats," Julius said, voice deadly calm. "Not when yours have finally been unearthed." He gestured to the investigators. "Read the charges." Scrolls were unrolled. Accusations poured into the air one after another, echoing off marble and bone. Fraud, extortion, incitement of violence, starvation of citizens for wealth, manipulation of the council, misuse of treasury, exploitation of rank laws, and conspiracy to harm a royal ward. Cornelius's face drained of color. Laughter, desperate, broken, burst from him. "These are lies, fabrications, slander crafted by an Omega-loving king who's been bewitched." "Enough!" Julius's voice cracked like a whip. "You will answer for every life you exploited, every death your greed caused, every deception you crafted to keep this kingdom under your thumb. You will lead by example by paying for your crimes." Cornelius pointed a shaking finger at me and Oli. "This is her fault. The child is a curse, an unnatural abomination. If she had never touched you, you'd still be a crippled king in need of my counsel." The hall gasped. Julius rose. No wheelchair, no weakness, just power rolling through the room with quiet, devastating force. "I am no man's crippled anything," he said. "And she," his gaze swept to Oli, is the reason I now stand. You called her an abomination when she restored what your treachery stole from this kingdom. Cornelius stuttered backward. Your Majesty, listen to reason. The only thing I will listen to, Julius said coldly, is justice. He lifted his chin, eyes locking onto Cornelius with the calm of a man delivering a long-overdue truth. You are stripped of your title. Gasps. Stripped of your lands. Gasps grew louder. Stripped of your wealth. Cornelius began to shake. And stripped, Julius finished, voice soft but lethal, of every privilege you used to harm this kingdom. Cornelius lunged forward, desperate. You can't do this. I served this throne for decades. I shaped this kingdom. You poisoned it, Julius answered. He turned to the guards. Take him. Cornelius struggled, curses spilling from his mouth as he was dragged toward the exit. You'll regret this, Julius. You'll drown in the chaos that girl brings. The doors closed behind him, and for the first time since Oli healed the king, the hall felt quiet, stable, breathing. Julius exhaled slowly, as though releasing years of buried weight. He sat back in his throne, gaze lifting to the council. This kingdom will not be ruled by fear, not anymore. His eyes drifted to me and Oli. Warmth flickered there, brief but unmistakable. The king who once let the world blind him could finally see. And the man beneath that crown? He had just declared war on anyone who dared threaten us again. Cornelius was taken away, and the kingdom would never hear his voice again. The hall had barely recovered from Cornelius's removal when Julius rose again, slowly, deliberately, drawing every eye back to the throne. The council straightened in their seats, bracing for another decree. Advisors leaned in, uncertain of what storm would break next. Even the guards seemed to stiffen, sensing the weight in the air. But Julius was not looking at them. He was looking at me, and that alone made the room tremble. Ollie's fingers tightened around mine. I felt her breath hitch, her small frame leaning closer, as if she sensed something enormous pressing against fate itself. My pulse hammered beneath my skin. Julius stepped down from the throne, not limping, not trembling, not leaning on anything for support. Every step echoed like truth, shattering old lies. The nobles watched him approach, waiting, wary, some nearly trembling with fear of what miracle-born power might drive him now. He did not stop until he stood directly before me. Oli peered up at him, wide-eyed. I swallowed hard, unable to interpret the warmth, no, the certainty, in his gaze. He turned to the court. I have one final decree, he said. Silence dropped like a stone in water. A noble cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, perhaps, given the recent events, it would be wise to postpone. No, Julius said simply, and the hall obeyed the word like a command from the moon itself. He faced the crowd fully, voice lifting to reach the farthest walls. This Omega woman, he began, was abandoned by the kingdom she served. She suffered in silence. She raised her child alone. And still, she found the strength to give me back my life. Gasps rippled through the chamber. My lungs tightened painfully. Julius continued. Her daughter possesses a gift the kingdom does not yet understand, but instead of seeing her gift as a blessing, fear has called her a curse. Ignorance has called for her death. He paused. Every heartbeat in the hall throbbed against the quiet. Then, no more. His voice thundered, filling every crack of the ancient chamber. Ollie's power is not a danger. It is a miracle. A gift meant to serve and strengthen this kingdom. Her light restored what was taken from me. Her courage defied a council too blind to see truth. Her purity is the very essence of what our people have forgotten. Hope. Whispers broke out, stunned, confused, shaking the air. A few elders bowed their heads. Others stared in disbelief. Julius lifted a hand, not to silence them, but to sharpen their focus. "And her mother," he said, turning his gaze back to me, "is the bravest person I have ever known." My breath left me entirely. He took a step closer, and another. Then, without hesitation, and without breaking eye contact with me, Julius raised his voice so the entire kingdom could hear. "I declare her my mate." The hall exploded. "What? Impossible! A king cannot— An Omega? This breaks every law. Your Majesty, reconsider." Their voices clashed like blades in a riot of shock. Even those who supported Julius's restoration now stared in open disbelief. Some clutched their robes. Others staggered to their feet. I stood frozen, my mind blank, my heart slamming so hard I felt it echo in my fingertips. I hadn't known. I hadn't guessed. I hadn't imagined he would do something so irreversible, so public, so binding. "Your Majesty," one councilman stammered, trembling, "a king's mate must come from noble lineage." "My lineage stands on its own," Julius said sharply. "Her rank, her background. She's an Omega widow." "And I am the Alpha King," Julius answered, voice blazing with authority. "My choice is law." The room fell into a stunned hush. He turned toward the crowd once more. "This kingdom has forgotten what power truly is," he said. "It does not lie in bloodlines or inherited rank. It lies in courage, in resilience, in hearts strong enough to endure what the world casts aside." His eyes returned to mine, and no heart is stronger than hers. Heat surged behind my eyes. Too much emotion, too quickly, too openly. He straightened then, shoulders lifted, voice ringing with the promise of a new dawn. "From this day forward, Omegas will no longer live as shadows. This kingdom will not be divided by fear. A new era begins, one where every wolf belongs, every voice matters, and every gift is honored." The hall trembled with the force of it. Some bowed, some looked away, some trembled with outrage, but nothing they felt mattered. Because Julius had made his claim, because the kingdom had witnessed it, and because I, speechless, shaken, overwhelmed, felt the ground shift beneath my feet in a way that terrified me, and warmed me, and cracked something open inside me. He had chosen me. Not privately, not quietly, but before the entire kingdom. I didn't know what future this declaration would forge, but I knew one truth with absolute clarity. Nothing in the world could ever return to what it once was. Not for the kingdom, not for Julius, and not for me. Night draped itself over the kingdom like a soft veil, gentler than the storm of voices that had thundered through the court hours earlier. The palace torches burned low, their flames flickering against stone as if whispering secrets. Secrets the kingdom would spend years unraveling. But within Julius's private chambers, the world felt impossibly still. Oli had fallen asleep almost instantly, worn from the chaos of the day and the weight of a future she didn't yet understand. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and lingered for a moment, watching her peaceful breathing, smoothing the blanket around her shoulders. "She is safe now," Julius said behind me, his voice quiet, steady, certain in a way that made my chest tighten. I turned. He stood by the balcony doors, moonlight spilling over him, outlining the shape of a man who had weathered storms and survived them, not because of power, but because of choice. His hands rested lightly on the railing, but tension radiated through him, not of anger, but anticipation. For a long, breathless moment he simply watched me. Not as a king, not as a protector, as a man who had already placed his heart in my hands and was waiting to see if I would take it. "Come," he said softly, extending a hand, not commanding, not even certain, just hopeful. My legs felt unsteady as I walked toward him. When I reached him, the moonlight brushed us both. Cool, silver, soft. It was the first quiet moment we'd shared since the world turned upside down. Julius exhaled, his posture easing slightly as if my nearness alone loosened something locked tight inside him. "I asked you once before," he said, voice low, "and you turned me down." I opened my mouth, but he lifted a hand gently, stopping the words. "You were right to." His eyes softened. "I asked from fear, from desperation, from a need to protect you, not from the fullness of what I feel." My breath caught. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, close enough that the warm brush of his breath grazed my cheek. His gaze searched mine with aching honesty. "But today, watching you stand in that hall, watching the kingdom witness your strength, your truth, your heart." A quiet shiver ran through his voice. I realized I wasn't asking out of fear at all. I was asking because I cannot imagine my life, my future, without you in it. Heat blossomed beneath my ribs, slow and spreading like sunrise. "Julius." He reached for my hands, careful, reverent as though touching something sacred. His thumbs brushed the tender skin at my wrists, lingering on the places where chains had once clamped down on me. "No woman," he murmured, "has ever challenged me the way you do. No woman has ever made me rethink everything I believed about power, about justice, about myself." His forehead touched mine, and the closeness stole the breath from my lungs. "You are strength where I had weakness. You are light where I had shadows. You are hope." My heart trembled under the weight of those words I had never imagined hearing again, not after the life I'd lived, not after the loss I'd endured. He lifted my chin gently, his eyes shining with something warm, fierce, and heartbreakingly vulnerable. "So this time," he whispered, "I ask not as a king seeking protection. I ask as a man who loves you." The world went quiet, utterly, beautifully quiet. "Will you be my mate?" My answer rose before fear could breathe, before doubt could press its cold fingers around my throat. It came from the place inside me that had longed for warmth, for second chances, for a future that didn't taste like survival alone. "Yes," I whispered, soft, trembling, but certain. "Yes, Julius, I will." Relief washed over him like a tide, followed by joy, subtle but bright, breaking across his features in a way that made him look nothing like a king, and everything like a man reborn. He lifted his hand to my cheek, and then, slowly, as though giving me the chance to pull away, he leaned in. Our lips met beneath the open moonlight. The kiss wasn't urgent. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't forged from fear or chaos or war. It was slow, steady, healing. A kiss that carried gratitude, tenderness, and the missing pieces of two lives finally finding place in each other. My fingers curled into his shirt. His hand slipped to the small of my back, gentle and sure. The world outside the balcony could rage and gossip and tremble with uncertainty. But here, wrapped in his arms, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something warm enough to wash away the ache of losing my first mate, and gentle enough to honor the woman I had become since home. Our kiss deepened, still slow, still careful, but full of a promise that would echo long after tonight ended. A promise born not from duty, not from fear, but from love forged in war and strengthened by survival. In the days that followed, a gentler breeze moved through the kingdom, subtle at first, like the quiet sigh of a land long starved for peace. It carried whispers of change, not sharp with fear this time, but soft with wonder. Hope began to unfurl in places where dread once grew thick. For the first time in years, I woke without bracing for loss. Julius rose each morning and walked the palace grounds with steady, confident steps, each one a reminder of the miracle Oli had given him. Citizens gathered along the paths just to see him move, their awe slowly melting into gratitude. And when Oli walked beside him, small hand tucked into his, the crowd bowed with respect instead of recoiling in terror. They began calling her moon-touched healer, not cursed, not dangerous, not abomination, blessed. Oli accepted their newfound reverence with a shy smile, sometimes hiding behind my skirt when too many eyes found her at once. Julius always placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her, reminding her she was not alone, reminding the kingdom she was under his protection, and under his love. She bloomed in that safety. She trained under palace healers, those who once feared her, but now looked at her with awe-filled humility. Her touch revived sick gardens, soothed old wounds, strengthened weakened wolves. With every life she touched, the kingdom's fear dissolved a little more. Soon, children chased after her, eager for her stories and sketches. Omega families came forward, grateful for a king who saw them. The marketplace reopened its arms to us, its hatred replaced by hesitant acceptance. Then genuine welcome. And slowly, the kingdom itself began to heal. Life with Julius unfolded quietly, like dawn spreading over dark fields. He no longer carried the stiffness of a man hiding his pain. He laughed more, freely, richly, especially when Oli attempted to teach him riddles she made up on the spot. In the evenings, after palace duties, he found me, not as a king seeking counsel, not as a ruler requiring loyalty, but as a man seeking the woman who had reshaped his world. We walked along moonlit corridors, sharing stories neither of us had ever thought we'd voice aloud. He learned how I fought for scraps when Oli was small. I learned how he endured years of silence and stillness behind the throne. He told me of the guilt he carried. I told him of the guilt I was finally ready to let go. He treated me not as someone he needed to protect, but as someone he wanted to walk beside. Partners, lovers, equals. At night, when the kingdom slept, he held me with a tenderness born not from pity, but from reverence. His fingers traced the scars life had left on me, and for the first time, I felt them not as shame, but as proof of survival. Home stopped being just a word. It became a feeling, warmth curling into my bones, safety wrapping around my heart, love, steady, earned, unwavering, filling every space grief once hollowed. My story was never meant to end in shadows. It wasn't meant to be a quiet tale of loss or a whispered chronicle of pain. It was meant for this, for light, for healing, for love rediscovered long after I believed it impossible. I once lived in a forgotten cabin at the edge of the world. Now I stand at the center of a kingdom that finally sees me, not as an Omega widow, not as a burden, not as a shadow, but as a queen, a mother, a woman reborn. And as Julius wraps his arms around me beneath the rising sun, Oli dancing through the flowers at our feet, I understand something I never thought I would again. I am home, at last. Thank you so much for listening. I tried something different with this story, by telling it from the protagonist's point of view, and I'd really love to hear what you honestly think. Should I keep creating stories like this, or should I stay with my usual style? Your feedback truly helps me grow, and if you enjoyed this one, feel free to check out the other stories on the channel. Until the next one, bye for now.